Welcome to this NRI and Strategic Insight discussion around Asia fund distribution. I have the pleasure to sit here with Horie-san, who I've known for almost a decade now. Right? We've been working for about 10 years. Right. And finally, we now have the pleasure to do a white paper together. So we wrote a piece on Asia fund distribution.
Right.
And where we put some of our data in and we put your unique analysis in there. We did a longer webcast around the key trends, but we want to summarize some of the things here for you. The first point, I guess, is the size of the industry. We talked about there's $100 trillion industry for investment management, but 30 trillion for mutual funds.
Right.
And Asia overall is about 3.7 or so from a mutual fund business. How big is the industry in Japan?
Right now, in the mutual fund business, we have two different kind of the mutual fund. One is a public mutual fund, and the other is a private placement mutual fund. That is a focus on the institutional investor. But the total amount, I think, $1 trillion. That is the size of the mutual fund.
And if you go beyond the mutual fund, include the pension fund industry?
Right. The pension fund side, I think, around $3 trillion. That total, I think, $4 trillion.
It's a very sizable business.
Sizable business, it is.
When we look at, of course, Asia is not one market. It's very unique. Has very unique characteristics, market by market.
Right.
If you look at Japan, there's some things, of course, about Japan that are very unique for the business, and some that are actually more broadly applicable.
Right.
What would you say when you look at, like, let's say the sub-advisory business or the Japanese fund management business? What are the unique versus the more regional characteristics that you identify?
Unique part is, I think, the very large domestic manager exists in Japan. That's why they are very capable of the distributors as well as individual investors. That's why sub-advisory business is so unique, and there are very few large domestic managers in the other Asian countries. That's I think the only part of sub-advisory is unique in Japan. But the other similarities in the Japan and Asia, that is a low interest rate and aging. As you can see, there are very similarities in the Taiwan, Korea, and Taiwan. Yeah. And we also seeing the very similar product like Japan, the monthly payment and the high yield fund in the Taiwan and Korea. That's I think the next few years, this kind of similarity is expanding to other Asian countries. That means the experience in the product innovation in Japan will be applicable to the other Asian countries.
You refer, of course, to the AllianceBernstein High Yield Bond Fund. We've seen a very successful high yield fund there that almost is now a retail phenomenon. We've seen last year Schroeder's multi-asset income fund in Hong Kong, and we've seen other funds there as well. Not quite the size of Japan, because if you look at last year's flows, we had about 70 billion in Asia. Almost 50 of that is in Japan. So it's still the driving market in terms of cash flows. What's interesting to me is when we look at the distribution channel perspective, you have a match or mix and match between brokers versus banks. When did the banks get into the business, and what's the structure operationally that you need to support banks versus brokers in Japan when it comes to fund distribution?
1998, the bank started to the mutual fund distribution in Japan, and in the initial point, they imitate the broker dealers, the supporting activity, but main difference between the broker dealer and the bank channel is the characteristics of the customer. The broker dealer's customer is more aggressive versus the very conservative for the bank, the customers. That I think bank channel would like to be more focused on the educational for the individual investor, what the mutual fund is and how importance of a mutual fund for your growth of the financial the assets. That's kind of different activities bank would like to support to the individual investor instead of the broker-dealer.
What does that mean for the key managers? So if we look at a large U.S. manager, let's say we're talking about PIMCO or Fidelity or Franklin Templeton and others, what kind of structure their business? How is their business in Japan? How many people? Are there differences in the people they have on the ground? How many people do they have? The staff they have, and the way they do their business there, or is it all the same?
In the foreign affiliated companies,
yes.
You mentioned, yes. The broker-dealer supporting that they have to focus on the very innovative product development for them. But supporting to the bank channel, the foreign affiliated asset management company would like to focus on more educational, the supporting to the distributors. That's, I think, quite different. But let me say the supporting staff is I think it is very similar. That the functionality to supporting the distributors is quite different.
Yeah.
But the number of supporting staff, it might be very similar.
What also struck me is when you look at some of the lists that NRI publishes, so the top firms for the sub-advisory business, you have PIMCO there on top, you have Western Asset Management, you have Fidelity and others. But you also have Itaú. So there's an interesting, and I think when you look at this list, you mentioned this in the webcast, it's a very stable list of leading companies. But is that with appealing themes such as the real, do we see more exchange globally now going forward when you look at a firm like Itaú being in Japan and vice versa? Do you see there's more globally connected business also for Japan, or is this a surprise, or is this not a surprise?
I see. And for long-term horizon, we would like to pursue high dividend yield. That is we cannot change the attitude. And the Brazil real is the one of the high dividend the provider. That's why Itaú will coming to the top 10 list. But I think that this kind of the low interest rate environment will continue in the future. I think the high dividend type product the needs is continuing. That's why the time by time the product development might be changing, but the theme is the same in the future. For
it gets me sort
years.
To one of the things we have seen is we thought pre-crisis 2005, 6, 7, a lot of flows into Asia, a lot of managers came into Asia with global UCITS structures. It worked very well. It was a well-known brand, and the flows were very strong. Then in 2008, those flows reversed. In Asia, they didn't really reverse, but they stopped. And it's interesting that in Europe, after the redemptions, you see now a big comeback for some managers. And Asia is subdued. And what we have seen is, I guess, a lot more regulatory change and uncertainty. What are your views on this? We have heard about the Asia Fund Passport and different initiatives and slower growth for some global funds. The Schroeder Multi-Asset Fund is a local fund. Do you see this trend towards a global product continue, or do you see is this going to be more local going forward, and how do you approach Asia?
I think Asian situation is quite different from other countries. Mainly the local regulators would like to support domestic manager because asset management business is a very growth business. That is why they are reluctant to support foreign domicile fund like UCITS fund. That's, I think, dramatically changing the regulatory landscape in the last 2-3 years. And in the case of Taiwan, they don't provide the license for the domestic domicile fund for the foreign affiliate asset management companies. That is why global players would like to buy domestic managers just for the setup domestic foreign domicile domicile fund. I think the situation changed. I think it will continue in the next 3-5 years. Regulators would like to support domestic manager instead of foreign affiliated manager. That is a continuing trend.
So it's going to be more complex, I guess, operationally
speaking.
Yes. You as within NRI, how do you address that? Is this something that you're looking at more global pictures now when you do your own research, events, thoughts? Is there more demand for that? Do you see a change for your own organization as well?
Yeah, our major customer is right now the Japanese asset management company. They would like to expand their capability, especially in the Japanese, Asian bond as well as Asian equity, the capability. We would like to support their expansion to the Asian region. That is a major focus on the Nomura Research Institute. We would like to support Japanese asset management company to broaden their capability especially in the Asian region. That is why we are concentrating our research activity in the Asian region.
Well, it was certainly a pleasure to do this research paper with you. We're going to see, we already have a big discussion in the webcast, so we're going to continue this in the coming months, but clearly there seems to be a lot of appetite for that. So thank you for coming to New York, Horie-san, and it was a pleasure to see you again.
Thank you very much.